China and South Korea clash in the East Sea. What is happening? Hello everyone, this is Global Insights again. As the title of the video shows, the content of this video revolves around analyzing the tension between South Korea and China. Will this issue escalate the conflict in the world? Will we suffer more now that we are already suffering? Let's watch the whole video. South Korean media outlets have reported on a tense 2-hour standoff between Chinese and South Korean Coast Guard vessels in the Hwahai Sea. The encounter took place on February 26 in the Provisional Measures Zone, PMZ, a sensitive maritime area between mainland China and the Korean Peninsula, where the two countries' exclusive economic zones, EEZs, overlap. The incident not only exposed the simmering conflicts between the two neighboring countries, but also raised major questions about the effectiveness of bilateral cooperation mechanisms and the risk of escalation in the region. So what really happened? And why has a jointly managed sea area become the focus of tension? According to South Korean news agency Yonhap, the incident began at 2:30 p.m. on February 26, 2025, when the 1,422-ton oceanographic research vessel Onuri of the Korea Institute of Ocean Science and Technology was dispatched to the PMZ to inspect new structures built by China. Seoul said this was an illegal action, violating the bilateral agreement on the management of the area. When the Onuri approached the structure about 1 kilometer away, the Chinese Coast Guard and 3 rubber boats carrying civilians approached, preventing the South Korean ship from deploying its investigation equipment. South Korea immediately dispatched a Coast Guard vessel to assist, leading to a standoff with Chinese forces that lasted about 2 hours. During the tense period, both sides presented their own arguments. South Korea asserted that this was a legitimate inspection activity, in line with the joint management of the BMZ. The Chinese Coast Guard, in turn, claimed the structures were aquaculture farms and ordered the Onuri to leave. Some of the Chinese on the rubber boat were reportedly carrying rakes, though there were no reports of fighting or violence. Ultimately, the South Korean ship appeared to have retreated, ending the standoff without achieving its investigative goal, according to the Korea Jonggang Daily. In response to the incident, which showed the seriousness of the event, the South Korean Foreign Ministry immediately coordinated with relevant agencies to protect the country's legitimate maritime rights and interests. On March 18, spokesman Lee Jae-gung announced that Seoul had summoned an official from the Chinese embassy to protest and send a strong message to Beijing. Meanwhile, the Chinese side, through spokesman Mao Ning, stressed that the situation in the Yellow Sea remains stable and the two countries are maintaining dialogue through maritime cooperation mechanisms. Ms. Mao affirmed that the communication lines between the two sides' maritime law enforcement forces remain open as if to ease tensions. This confrontation is not an armed conflict, but it reveals deep disagreements on how to interpret and enforce regulations in the BMZ. To understand this better, it is necessary to look back at the historical and legal context of this area. The Yellow Sea, located between mainland China and the Korean Peninsula, has long been a flashpoint of dispute due to its strategic geographic location and rich resources. Covering an area of about 380,000 square kilometers, the sea is not only an important shipping route connecting East Asia to the world, but also contains abundant fishery resources, especially sardines, mackerels, and shrimps, which contribute greatly to the economies of both China and South Korea. However, the delimitation of the EASF according to the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, creates an encroachment zone between the two countries, where the distance between the Chinese and South Korean coasts is only about 400 kilometers, less than the maximum width of the EASF of 200 nautical miles on each side. To address this issue, China and South Korea signed a fisheries agreement in 2001, establishing a Provisional Measures Zone, BMZ, as a temporary solution rather than a formal demarcation. The BMZ extends from 35 degrees to 37 degrees north latitude, allowing fishing vessels from both countries to fish and is jointly managed by both parties. The agreement, prohibits all activities other than fishing and navigation, including construction of structures or exploitation of other resources, in order to avoid complicating the dispute until a permanent solution is reached. However, the reality is that this agreement is not enough to prevent conflicts. Over the past 2 decades, collisions between Chinese fishing vessels and the South Korean Coast Guard have occurred frequently, mainly due to Chinese fishermen illegally fishing in South Korean-controlled waters. According to the South Korean Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, from 2016 to 2010, an average of about 200 Chinese fishing vessels were detained each year for violations. A serious incident in 2016 that saw a South Korean Coast Guard vessel rammed and sunk by a Chinese fishing boat near Yongyang Pier raised concerns about maritime security. The confrontation on February 26, 2025, marked a new escalation, as the conflict was not limited to fishing, but involved construction work, which South Korea considered a serious violation of the BMZ agreement. China, in turn, argued that it was a fish farm within its permitted fishing zone. The differences in interpretation reflect Beijing's ambitions to expand its influence in the Yellow Sea, and also show the limitations of the common mechanism without a clear consensus. For South Korea, the BMZ incident is not just a legal issue, but also a matter of national security and economic interests. The Yellow Sea is a major source of fisheries for millions of people, accounting for about 30% of the country's annual catch, according to 2023 data from the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. If left unchecked, China's construction projects could deplete fish stocks, pollute the marine environment, and threaten the livelihoods of South Korean fishermen. Furthermore, the Yellow Sea's strategic location near Seoul, and important military bases, makes Seoul particularly sensitive to any moves by China that could change the status quo in the region. Sending the Onuri to inspect the area is a proactive move that demonstrates South Korea's determination to assert joint management rights in the BMZ. However, the withdrawal after 2 hours of confrontation shows that Seoul wants to avoid military escalation, prioritize diplomatic solutions, which is consistent with South Korea's consistent stance, resolving disputes through dialogue and international law, and relying on the alliance with the U.S. to threaten China. The presence with the U.S. in the Yellow Sea, through joint exercises with South Korea such as Four Eagle, also shows that Seoul is more confident in dealing with Beijing. On the other side, China seems to be applying a familiar strategy, using civil works to strengthen maritime claims, despite objections from neighboring countries. The construction of aquaculture farms in the BMZ, if true, is not only about economic exploitation, but also creating a premise to expand influence in the encroached area. This is an approach similar to what China has done in the South China Sea, where artificial islands and militarized infrastructure have helped Beijing change the status quo, despite the 2016 Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling. The move comes amid a surge in China's domestic demand for seafood, as wild catches decline due to pollution and overfishing in nearshore waters. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, China is the world's largest consumer of seafood, consuming more than 60 million tons per year by 2023. Expanding aquaculture in the Yellow Sea not only meets economic needs, but also meets Beijing's food security strategy. However, by implementing the projects without consulting Korea, China has violated the cooperative spirit of the 2001 Fisheries Agreement, increasing tensions. China's diplomatic response emphasized the stability of the situation and the high level of communication, suggesting that Beijing wanted to control the story and avoid letting the incident damage bilateral relations, which have improved in recent years thanks to economic and trade cooperation. However, the mobilization of Coast Guard troops and people carrying rakes in the confrontation sent a strong signal, implicitly warning South Korea of the possibility of escalation if Seoul continued to challenge it. The 2-hour confrontation in the Yellow Sea on February 26, 2025, between China and South Korea was not an isolated incident, but a manifestation of deep-rooted conflicts over interests, power, and legal interpretations in the reclaimed waters. For South Korea, it was an attempt to protect its legitimate interests against China's expansion, For Beijing, it was a strategic move to consolidate its influence amid growing regional competition. Although the incident ended without violence, it left an important lesson. The lack of clarity in joint management and unilateral ambitions could turn the Yellow Sea into a new flashpoint in East Asia. Both sides are now calling for dialogue, but the road ahead is not easy. China and South Korea need to overcome differences and build trust. Otherwise, similar confrontations will recur, threatening peace and stability in one of the most important seas in the world.